What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back for a discussion of Starfield. Today is the official global launch of Starfield, the much anticipated new game from Bethesda Game Studios and their first new intellectual property in 25 years. Now, Bethesda, they've created some of my all-time favorite games, including Elder Scrolls 3, Morrowind, Elder Scrolls 4, Oblivion, Elder Scrolls 5, Skyrim, and obviously Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. And I've easily invested hundreds, if not thousands of hours into all 5 of those games, and I not only regard them as some of my all-time favorite role-playing games, but my all-time favorite games, period. Or you could even go so far as to say they're some of my all-time favorite fantasy and sci-fi experiences, whether you're talking about books, movies, shows, games, whatever. They are that good. They are in the Hall of Fame. So naturally, Starfield's been on my radar for a very long time, and I picked it up during early access, and I think right now I'm about 25 hours into my first playthrough. And I should add that most people, before offering a full, complete review of the game, put about 100 hours into the game. So let me be clear, this is not a review, as strange as it sounds. I still feel like I'm just getting started with the game, or kind of just getting started with my character, which is both a good and bad problem to have, which I'll be getting into later. But I do want to share a few of my early impressions of the game, as well as some words of advice for anyone who's considering picking it up, or perhaps even going so far as to buy an Xbox just to be able to play it, because this game is not available on the PlayStation. It was only released on Windows and the Xbox Series X/S, because both Microsoft and Xbox have a ton riding on this game. They recently bought Bethesda for $7.5 billion, and the launch of this game, one with a budget of $400 million. For me, it's very similar to 10 years ago when Disney released The Force Awakens after buying Lucasfilm for $4 billion. This is not a one-off experiment. Microsoft clearly looks at Bethesda as a huge source of gaming content for them in the years to come. But the question for every hardcore Bethesda fan out there, and I recognize there are Bethesda fans out there who have been hardcore Bethesda fan for 10, 15 years before I even heard the word Bethesda. I got on board basically like in the early 2000s. But now that Bethesda is part of Microsoft, part of this giant corporate entity, the biggest question is whether or not Bethesda Game Studios director Sam Howard can still deliver a classic game, an iconic game, also an iconic game not based on any of his past successes. So let's get into it. So let me say this very clearly and very carefully. I really, really like Starfield. I don't think that I love it, or at least I don't love it on the level of those 5 games that I mentioned before, because I am addicted to it. I play it compulsively, at times joylessly. I've been more or less kind of happily grinding away and leveling up my stealthy space pirate who has a knack for persuasion and crafting items, and I have to say that developing your skills in this game is easily one of the most entertaining aspects of the game, and also one of the ones that feels most innovative, because you can't just pump points into certain skills. You have to do little like in-game challenges before you can invest points. So basically, whatever build you want to have, you will earn your build over time by practicing the various skills that you choose. I find that aspect of the game to be most satisfying. And also, a word of caution for new players, pick your initial skills very carefully, because several of the skills offer enormous quality of life improvements that make the game much more accessible overall. And I recommend everybody go over to the YouTube channel Fextra Life, where they have guides on the most important skills to choose early on in the game. But I'd say on the whole, I'm thoroughly enjoying all the various missions that are available within the main factions of the game. And each faction, they've got different loyalties and different agendas, and some of them conflict with one another. It's very similar to Fallout 4 in that respect. But one of the best parts of the game is when you get a new mission and you blast off into space, wondering what you're going to encounter when you get there. And I should also add that the story and the setting of the game is basically 300 years from now. Humanity is spread out to a bunch of different star systems and a bunch of different worlds, and they're now wrestling with the aftermath of a particularly nasty conflict called the Colony War. And without offering any spoilers, let me just say that there are additional threats to be encountered, as well as additional kind of revelations to be made about our universe. But it's hard to discuss those without offering spoilers for someone like the main story quest or some of the main faction quests. So I'll let y'all discover that on your own. But it's safe to say that I'm going to continue playing this game for many weeks to come. This is a Bethesda game, and only they can do what they do. But, ... And here comes the hate from the ride or die Bethesda fans who think all their games are flawless and beyond reproach. I don't completely, unreservedly love the game the way that I was expecting to, or hoping to. But the other 5 Bethesda games that I mentioned, basically from the moment I turned the game on, I was completely enthralled. I was just like, I was completely in love. I couldn't imagine wanting to do anything else with my time apart from playing those games. It was truly love at first sight. And I feel like both Elder Scrolls V Skyrim as well as Fallout 4 did a brilliant job of hurling you into the game with a really cool, interesting, kind of dramatic moment at the beginning of the game that would teach you the basics of the game or teach you the basics of the gameplay, while at the same time getting you excited about the world and basically incentivizing you to go out in any direction you could possibly imagine, chomping at the bit with excitement over what you might be about to encounter. But Starfield has this problem where the worst part of the game is the first few hours of the game, where it doesn't feel particularly innovative or original, especially in comparison to their games that are now 10 years old or more. And in some cases, Bethesda and Starfield feel like they might have even taken a few steps backwards in terms of their quest design, the role-playing, the combat system, but there's no getting around the fact that the biggest failing of this game is how it starts. And I think a decent number of players are going to want to be reimbursed after their first few hours, and they'll be making a mistake, but I'll understand their frustration. It blows my mind just how boring the intro to the game is, to the point where I found myself screaming like, let me off the leash just so I can start doing stuff and making my own decisions. Because historically, one of the things that people have loved most about Bethesda is whether you follow the main storyline or just pick a mountain in the distance and just go, you're going to have an equal amount of fun either way. Like, it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to encounter really cool, interesting experiences. And now that I'm 25 hours deep into my campaign, I am growing to love the game. However, there is a massive hump that you have to get over in terms of understanding how to navigate the game quickly, efficiently, and in satisfying fashion. Because early on, you're going to feel like 70% of your time or more is spent on basically time-consuming busy work that's about as much fun as going through orientation at a job that you don't want to take. And honestly, if I hadn't had so many incredible experiences with Bethesda games in the past, I don't know if I would have had the patience to endure those initial few hours to get to the good stuff. You're going to constantly feel like you're kind of looking for this masterpiece of a game that's tucked away or hidden beneath hundreds of hours of kind of busy work and just bullshit content. So let's start with the quest. This game features way too many quests where quest givers basically will talk your ear off for like 10 or 15 minutes, all while making you follow them around just to send you to yet another location requiring shitloads of fast traveling as well as shitloads of load screens, only to repeat the process all over again. It's like, couldn't you have just done the exposition dump all in one place? Like, don't make me go through 10 doorways where I'm constantly loading in order to hear more nonsense. Because at a certain point, the speakers are just droning on for so long, you'll find yourself just button mashing to get through all the dialogue options. Like, please, just let me get back to playing the game. And obviously, load screens are unavoidable in a game of this size and ambition and scope, but they can absolutely kill the momentum of a game. When you're sitting around waiting for a character to walk towards you, all while they're talking, it's like, please just keep up. Please just talk more quickly. Please let me skip through these fucking dialogue options. And oftentimes, these escort quests or navigation quests, they feel like quests from a game that was made like 15 years ago, whereas Bethesda used to have a reputation for being on the cutting edge of quest design. Because if you were to ask me which game has the more entertaining, more enjoyable, more engaging quests, like Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, which I bought like in 2006, or Starfield, give me Oblivion any day of the week. Those quests are much more interesting, much more dynamic. And I hate to say this about any Bethesda game, but the role-playing in Starfield, it is a chore. It feels like labor. It feels like work. Whereas role-playing should be one of the most exciting parts of the game when you're defining the individual character of the character that you're playing. But the real Achilles heel of this game, which is just murderously frustrating, is inventory management. YouTube's already flooded with countless videos about how to navigate this loathsome aspect of Starfield. And I think if there's one consistent complaint that I've seen in all the videos about Starfield, everybody hates the inventory management, because unless you're willing to digest several videos in advance of even playing the game, you are going to waste countless hours trying to figure out what items to pick up, what items to hang on to, what items to save for crafting, what to store in your ship's cargo hold, what to sell, and most important of all, which items to ignore entirely. And you have to do all this with a character who has so little upper body strength they can barely put on their spacesuit and pick up a few weapons before they're full and have to go back to a store and dump a few items. And because the maps and navigation in this game are so hopelessly fucked up, you can't ever find a store when you need one. Like, you'll spend just as much time looking for a store as you did gathering all the materials in the first place, and then you can't remember what the hell you were doing when you were gathering all those items. But more on the maps and navigation later, but that is another major flaw in the game. And you will get stronger over time and be able to carry more stuff. But when you first start a game, what you really want to do is play and play hard. And I feel like there are like 4 key areas of a Bethesda experience that you really want to engage in. Like, obviously you want combat, you want amazing combat. You want challenging puzzles. You want really interesting, dramatic role-playing. And of course, you want exploration of a fascinating environment. No one dreams of oh, I want to spend 20 hours in a store trying to figure out whether or not to hang on to this fruit or this component that I might need to build a ship or a city down the road. You will spend so much time just scratching your head when what you really should be doing is playing. And all of those 4 major areas of gameplay take a huge hit when you're sitting around just trying to figure out what to do with the countless items with really weird, unfamiliar names that you're going to stumble upon every step of the way of this game. Whether you're in a town or on a moon or invading a base, you're surrounded by all this crap. And over time, you'll figure out, maybe I don't need to look at every single item until I get to the end of a particular raid on a pirate, because all the good stuff is going to be in the final room. But you only learn that by making many costly, time-consuming mistakes. A perfect example is the first time I found a piece of contraband. And this game makes a big deal about contraband. Every time you arrive in a fresh system, you get scanned basically by the police to see if you have any contraband on your ship. You're free and clear to land, blah, blah, blah. All right, yeah, so contraband must be a big deal. And if you get caught with any contraband, you get a fine, they throw you in jail and all this crap. So I finally found a piece of contraband. I was so excited. And then I proceeded to spend about 2 hours trying to find a place where I could sell this fucking contraband so that I won't get arrested every time I arrive in a fresh system. And when I finally found a vendor who would buy it, I got about 2,000 in-game credits, which, to put in perspective, is about as good as finding a random shitty gun off of any random mob that you might have killed. And I just wanted to fucking break my TV screen. I wanted to break my Xbox. I was I just spent 2 hours trying to figure out how to sell this fucking thing, and it was a total complete waste of time. In terms of actually earning money, my time would have been much better spent just going into combat and picking up the guns of my enemies. And for people out there who have demanding jobs or demanding personal lives or a family that they're looking after where their time is precious, their free time is the most precious resource imaginable, and they've been looking forward to this game for 10 years, when you waste any time on bullshit in a game, you can feel your emotions turning against it. It's all I want is to have that great Bethesda experience that I've had so many times before. Why are you wasting my time over and over and over again with all this busy work? And so when I see some people getting eaten alive online for negative reviews of the game, I just want to say, look, this is a really, really good game. It's an ambitious game. It's vast in scope, and it's got so much complexity. But it's not a fucking home run. We're allowed to criticize this game. It's not a perfect experience. And I think over time, as we learn how to play the game more efficiently, it will become a perfect experience. But once again, you might have to invest 100 hours into the game before you figure out how to play it in a way where it feels like that perfect game that you want it to be. And most alarming of all is how the Bethesda format, or the Bethesda approach, their signature style after all these years of greatness, starting to feel a little stale, starting to get a little moss growing on the edges. And the combat system, it feels ripped straight out of Fallout 4, but I would argue that Fallout 4 had more entertaining combat. That's a 10-year-old game. The VAT system was so cool. You didn't have to use the VAT system, but if you wanted to, you could use the VAT system to blow people's legs off or get headshots or whatever the case might be. There's very little about the combat system in this game that feels unique, whereas Elder Scrolls V had those dragon shouts you could do. That felt unique. And the spells, there was this incredible spell system where you can invent your own spells. But as you're playing this game, you're all right, I'm shooting guys with machine guns and it feels like combat and I'm leaning out around corners, but none of this is new. The game feels like an iteration as opposed to an innovation. But the combat's not the only aspect of the game that's starting to feel a little stale and a little old. Character interactions in their previous games used to be fun. It used to be exciting. Whereas you meet countless characters in this game, and they almost seem to have been made in a way where they're deliberately bland and unattractive and interchangeable and just boring. No character seems to have any style or flair or pride in their appearance or a unique way of speaking. Apparently in the future, no one needs a personality, no one needs sex appeal. And it just starts to feel old when a game is filled with thousands of people that you don't want to talk to. And just to go back to my analogy about how so much of the busy work in this game feels like orientation at a job that you did not want to take, the interactions with the characters in this game feels a little bit like when you start a new school or start a new job or whatever, and you're forced to go to these kind of manufactured social settings where everybody gets to know each other with name tags, and you look around and you scan the room I don't want to be here, I don't want to talk to these people, let's go to the bar and talk to the people who are fun. There are no fun people in this game at all. And it makes me feel like a lot of the writers who are writing quests for this game, they're probably not very fun people to begin with. The best novelists, the best filmmakers, the best storytellers tend to be really interesting people, or at least really interesting speakers, there's a lack of personality in this game that seems to be getting worse the more I play it as opposed to better. And it's funny, it's one of those things where a day or so ago, if you had put a gun to my head and said, what do you think of Starfield? I would have said, oh, it's a Bethesda game. It's a great game. But the more I talk about the game, the more I'm starting to realize how many frustrations I have about the game that are starting to kind of rise to the surface. But my last critique or observation is something I'm still wrestling with because I can't quite put my finger on it. I can't tell if the lack of individual style to the setting is brilliant or a design flaw, because when you look at the game on the surface, like, wow, like this is a giant futuristic setting with so many things to do and so many worlds to explore, and it almost seems like they willfully or deliberately avoided having an individual style. Like Mass Effect, those games had an individual style, like from the alien races that are part of it, or the biotic system, like the mental powers you can develop. Just there was a feel, there was a look to the Mass Effect world where you walk into a building or you walk into a room or you land on a world, like this feels like Mass Effect. Starfield doesn't feel like anything, and it almost feels like the lack of an individual aesthetic is the aesthetic of the game. Like when you watch Alien movies, or when you watch Star Wars movies, or when you watch Star Trek movies, like they feel like Alien movies, or they feel like Star Wars, or they feel like Star Trek. Like every fictional setting has its own unique atmosphere and its own unique details. Everything about Starfield feels like willfully and deliberately generic, whereas like contrast that with Fallout 4. Fallout 4 had style coming out of its, like oozing out of its sweat pores. What's cool about Fallout is that it's always like this retro 50s flavor mixed with this horrific dystopian, futuristic, apocalyptic kind of nuclear wasteland, and the combination of those two flavors makes Fallout feel like a unique world unto itself. But Starfield almost seems like it's trying to sell us on a vision of the future where everything feels very mundane and predictable and realistic and grounded. And I'm like, well, is this genius or is this boring? Because does the accumulation of all these mundane tasks and like going to worlds and scanning it for resources and building bases and that sort of thing, like, are they trying to basically prepare us for the future? Like maybe, but it doesn't translate to a great, fun gaming experience. There's a lack of electricity. There's a lack of fun. There's a lack of excitement. In my opinion, turning on a game should not feel like clocking in at a part-time job. But with Starfield, very often it does. You can easily waste like hours upon hours farming resources for all your side projects, like wandering around on various moons and planets, looking for something to do and finding nothing. And for me, that is work. You are basically doing busy work to accomplish long-term objectives. And so much about this game is all about being able to travel to different worlds and like scanning it and exploring it. But like, what's the point of exploring all these random moons and planets if there's quite literally nothing on them apart from like a few plants and maybe scan a few indigenous life forms? Like contrast that with Skyrim or Fallout 4, where you can go in any direction and have a fucking blast, all while leveling up your skills, working on your side quests, getting in good with your factions, etc. Starfield is infinite, it's vast, it's complex, but you never feel excited to go anywhere because all the worlds feel so interchangeable. Like, I'll take one great world or just one great city over 1,000 interchangeable worlds. And it's funny how talking about this game makes you feel like you have like a multiple personality disorder, because I'm being very critical of the game. I have a lot of frustrations with the game, but the moment I finish this video, I'm going to go back to the game and keep working on my quests and working on my factions and working on my skills and all that crap. But I guess I have one final critique or one final observation. The navigation in this game sucks. Unless you're following a specific quest with a specific quest objective, you'll basically struggle to go anywhere. Like, there's no reason to get lost in the game. There's no reason to explore the game. In fact, I would strongly dissuade you from ever just like going off in a random direction. You will die from boredom, because in this game, you're constantly fast traveling to different cities, different outposts, different space stations. And because you're constantly fast traveling to so many different locations, you never feel like you get to know any of them particularly well. Like when I think about some of the previous worlds that Bethesda made, I can see those worlds in my mind. Like I know every inch of those worlds because I've explored them many times over. Very rarely in Starfield do you ever feel compelled to return to any place unless you have a very specific quest objective. Like, I need to talk to this person, or I need to pick up this item, and I need to deliver it here, and I need to kill that person. Once again, you're led by the nose by all your quest objectives, and in the absence of quests and missions, you are totally fucked. So in conclusion, I'll just say that the best role-playing games made by Bethesda or anyone else, the worlds that we want to be a part of. Those are worlds that we want to live in, that we yearn to be a part of. And Starfield is not a future that I want to visit. Like, without going into spoilers, the first time that I encountered something that was not human, that should have been like the coolest moment in the game. Like, oh my God, like that type of creature is real. I can't wait to talk to it, fight it, kill it, whatever. And it just felt predictable and generic and like something I was overly familiar with already. And so this is one of those games that I play compulsively, relentlessly, with like anger and frustration as opposed to joy and enthusiasm, because I know once I figure out what aspects of the game to ignore, I'll be able to focus on the masterpiece that's hidden at the core of the game. But they've added so much bullshit to the game where you can waste so much time on so many random activities, which makes the world feel realistic. But this is a game. We're not trying to give people a second life. Like, we already have life to look forward to. Like, we all have to pay taxes and open our mail and pay our bills and all that kind of crap. We don't want a repeat of that in a game. It's a game. It's supposed to feel exciting. It's supposed to be fun. And I bet by the time I get 100 hours deep into the game, I will know how to play the great game at the core and ignore everything else. And when I reach that aha moment, maybe I'll come back for another video about the game. But I think another reason I'm so frustrated with this game is that this is all coming at a time where I just had one of the best gaming experiences that I've ever had, Baldur's Gate 3, which is easily the game of the year. Starfield doesn't even come close. I know some people are saying, oh no, it's Diablo 4. To all those people out there claiming that Diablo 4 is the game of the year, I'll just say, behave yourself. Like, enjoy Diablo 4. I'm thrilled you're enjoying Diablo 4. It can't even hold a candle to Starfield, which in my opinion, Starfield can't even hold a candle to Baldur's Gate 3, because everything that I hate about Starfield is great in Baldur's Gate 3. The character interactions are fascinating. I love those characters. I can't wait to get back to Baldur's Gate 3 and interacting with all my companions and interacting with all the NPCs and all the villains. It is one of the best written games ever. It's one of the best acted games ever. And the combat system is so relentlessly enjoyable. Like, I will play Baldur's Gate for 12 hours at a time and looking back, oh my God, like, well, what happened to the day? Like, I forgot to brush my teeth. I forgot to eat. Like, Baldur's Gate 3, you just get completely sucked in. Like, Baldur's Gate 3 is one of those games where you play to the point where your hands are absolutely locking up in agony, but you're just determined to keep going. Starfield, the fact that I've had the game a week and I'm only 25 hours in, tells you all you need to know. So long story short, I should have just said this at the beginning of the video. It would have saved everybody a lot of time. I really, really, really like Starfield, but I don't love it. It's got a lot of flaws that make me fucking hate the game at times. Like, I get really frustrated, really angry, and I wanted it to be yet another Bethesda classic. But I think if this is a sign of what we can expect from Bethesda now that they're part of Microsoft, I think the golden age of Bethesda is over, and now we will see them slowly but surely becoming another company like BioWare or Blizzard, where these are companies that used to give us some of our all-time favorite gaming experiences 20 years ago. Now they're just offering games that offer a feeling of diminishing returns from titles or franchises that we used to love. Like Elder Scrolls 6 used to be my most anticipated game imaginable, and now it's not after playing Starfield for a week. My most anticipated game imaginable is whatever Larian Studios does next, or whatever From Software does next. Like, From Software and Larian are what BioWare and Bethesda and Blizzard and all these companies used to be in a bygone era, but nothing lasts forever. Creativity matters, innovation matters, fresh idea matters, fresh gameplay matters. And I don't think Starfield has anything particularly unique as a selling point, apart from the fact that it just has that Bethesda infrastructure that you can fall back on, where if you love Bethesda games in the past, you will really like Starfield, but I don't think it's going to be anybody's new favorite Bethesda game. But at this point, I'm repeating myself. It's time to wrap this sucker up. I'm looking forward to a lively debate with my fellow gamers about the merits or lack thereof with Starfield. But if you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting that notification bell, liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hunting me down on Twitter at Colbrax and all that good stuff. But hope everybody enjoys Starfield. Hope everybody enjoys Starfield more than I have. But if you're considering spending like $500 on an Xbox and $100 on the game, I might tell you, wait for 6 months. Maybe they'll iron out some of these problems and there'll be a more satisfying gaming experience down the road. But that's all I've got to say. So thanks again for watching. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.